Welcome to 2 plus 2 equals cabbage. In this video, we're going to talk about how do I deploy a Palo Alto firewall to Azure with Terraform. We're going to go a little bit quicker on this video than we have in others. We're going to skip some of the basics, and you can always go back to those basics in the other videos, which some of them will be linked in the description below. But we're going to go right into looking at the Terraform code, seeing what we need to do to deploy a Palo Alto firewall. We're going to take a closer look at route tables to make sure that we're routing the traffic through the Palo Alto firewalls, some basics of the firewall, looking at the interface in a little bit of detail just to get familiar with things to check to make sure it works. We've still got our good old Windows VM that we'll be logging into to make sure we're getting traffic through the firewall. So let's get started. Let's figure it out together. Okay, getting straight into VS Code, we're looking at the sample code that we got from GitHub. Everything's up there along with instructions, so you can just clone that down and jump right in. We're going to take a quick look at the Terraform TFRs template. A lot of the things come forward from other projects where we needed to have the basics just so we could publish to Azure with Terraform. Here, we're going to specify a few things specific to our Palo Alto firewalls. We're specifying the VM size that I know works with these images, Palo Alto image, the VM series we're going to use, the license we're going to use. Bring your own license. For testing, it's perfectly fine. We're going to throw the latest version up there. It'll probably be in 11.2 range or something like that when we run this. In this case, in Azure, we can specify the firewall admin username, and we can also specify the firewall admin password. So those things, just take a breeze through that. Make sure you throw a password in there, and we'll be good. Next, for these projects, I've created a couple of READMEs, which are pretty detailed. Generally, walking through them should be pretty clear and get you to where you need to be. There's a basic README and a detailed README. The detailed README is just a little bit more detailed. Now, keep in mind, I throw a disclaimer at the end of these every time. While I went through and created these, I used Grok in this case to format them and get them ready to go. So I've done a lot of work in trying to prompt accurately to make it do what I wanted it to do. But anyone who's used any kind of a chatbot before knows they're not always as easy to work with getting things consistently detailed the way you want. So just keep that in mind. All right, moving into the firewall TF. So this is the one that contains all the information for the Palo Alto instance. One thing about the Palo Alto instances, and probably some others, I know it's some others, but I can't think of an example right now, but Palo Alto is one where you have to accept the license agreement within Azure before it'll let you deploy the instance. And I struggle with that early on. And this block up here should take care of that for us. If it doesn't, it usually generates an error that'll give you information on how to manage that. But this has seemed to work well for me. Other things in here, not an awful lot. You know, we're setting a public IP for the management interface, public IP on the untrust interface, and the rest is generally straightforward. Zip through it. You've got your NICs, which are the trust interface, the untrust interface. We're building the VM down here, the instance, so all the things that we're pulling in as inputs. Here we're giving the firewall a very simple name, and that's about it. We're going to get some outputs at the end of our push that's going to tell us all the IP addresses that we may need to use. Primarily, we're going to be looking for the management public IP so we can log in and do some things. And then the untrust public IP will be important for when we want to test our RDP access to our Windows VM. That's another thing that we'll need. And then on the routing table side, we are creating a route table in Azure, and we'll associate it with the trust subnet of the where the VM is going to, the Windows VM is going to live, just to make sure that there's no possibility that that VM is going to take the default Azure routes, because by default Azure will route it out to the internet. directly. So we want to make sure we're routing it through our firewall. So we're telling it, here's the route table, here's the firewall, make sure you go through it. And that's most of it there. Um, Another thing that's a little bit more involved in this scenario is we've got more security groups, network security groups in Azure. So you'll see here, we've got one for the management, which is allowing access to the management subnet of the firewall. We've got one on the untrust. And for our use case here, we're basically saying we trust the Palo Alto firewall to do all the controls. So we're creating a security group and assigning it, but it's basically wide open. So we're not providing any control. Um, and then we're doing the same thing on the internal side, the trust side, where we're saying the firewall, Palo Alto is controlling this traffic. Azure, don't get in the way, is basically what we're saying here. And that's it. So we've got the security groups, we're associating them with the subnets down here. And that's about it for that. And the one file that's not technically part of the Terraform configuration, but it is within the download in the GitHub, is the configuration file for the firewall itself. So what we'll do through this process is we'll use this file to import into the Palo Alto firewall. It contains all of the configuration we need, all of the policies, the address objects, the NAT policies and everything. So this is ready to go. And the only thing that you'll want to do here before you import it is you want to do a find and replace for the IP address 5.5.5.5. I just put that in there as a placeholder, and you'll just change that to your actual public IP address and save the file. And then we'll import it into the Palo Alto firewall. Now there's another way to do it once we're in the GUI of the firewall, and I'll show you that too, but this is just one other way to do it. And now that we've gone through all that, we're ready to do our Terraform init. Like before, this goes through and just prepares the environment. So we've got all the providers we need, and we can start publishing. Okay, that went as expected. So now we'll do our Terraform plan. And that finished as expected. Doesn't look like any major issues. 25 things to add. So there's a lot of components that we're adding. You know, the Windows instance, all the stuff to go along with the firewall, some disks and some interfaces and lots of stuff like that. So now we're ready to apply. Well, that took a while, but thanks to the magic of YouTube, it was only a few seconds here, so we're good. So our push or our apply completed. We see that we've got our 25 resources created, and that information I spoke about, some of the IP addresses and other important information down at the bottom here. So we're all good there. That went just as it should have. So what we'll do next is we'll go over to the Azure console once again, just to have a look at where things are, how they look, not spend much time there, just to take a quick look. And then once we've gone through that, we can move on to looking at the firewall and moving on after that. Over in the familiar Azure portal, we're ready to take a look at our resources, and we'll just quickly jump in just to see where they are. So we're just going into the resource groups link here. We see the one resource group that we just created, and we click into there, and we see it lists all the resources that were created in that case. So we've got our firewall VM right here. Clicking into there, the only thing we're looking at is, if we needed to find the public IP, it's right here or right here. All the other stuff, we see OS, the size, everything else, pretty standard stuff, like what we've seen before, even with the Windows instance that we've done in the past. And back here, we see all these network interfaces. So we've got all these here for the firewall. Down here, we can see the Windows instances down here. So a few more objects than we've created in the past, but everything's still in the same place, so no surprises. Let's go and jump into the Palo Alto firewall interface so we can actually start configuring that and making it work. All right, here we are, ready to log into the Firewall's web interface. All we did was take that public IP address that we got from either the Azure console or from the Terraform output, threw it up in the browser window, HTTPS, and we're ready to log in. And the username and password that we have was in our Terraform. And we just have to go ahead and throw those in. Log in. We're ready to go. Close the banners. And this is a blank configuration, so there's nothing in here. If we look through monitor, policies, objects, there's not going to be anything in there quite yet. So what we have to do is we need to import our configuration. And that file was part of the GitHub. We looked at it earlier. We'll go over to the device tab. We will click on the, well, if we weren't there already, we'll go to setup and then operations. So we can import the named configuration snapshot. We will browse and we'll select the file from the GitHub. Click OK. And that imports really quickly. But while we've imported it, we haven't loaded it yet. So we need to go and click Load Named Configuration Snapshot. And it will show up in the list here. We'll just pick the one that we imported and click OK. And that will load it up. Now we've got things that will show up in places like policies and objects. So let's go take a look over at policies really quick. The policies that are in here are just enough to get it so that our RDP session to our Windows instance will work. And then we've got in the NAT, we've got a NAT there. So we're saying if you're coming from the outside and you're trying to get to the Windows instance and you're coming from your public IP, it's okay. And we're going to translate the RDP port into the public IP, into the private IP of the Windows instance. In this case, I threw it in as a bidirectional NAT. Didn't have to do it that way, but it's pretty simple to do that. And then for future use, if we have any other instances running in that network, we can just see that all the other traffic, if it tries to go out to the internet, it will just fall under the IP address of the public or untrust Ethernet interface. Couple of other things under the objects tab. We've got the IP addresses of everything, the address objects. We've got my public IP, which, as I mentioned earlier, we need to change this from the 5555 to whatever your IP address is. You would just click on this, type your IP address in here, click OK, and commit, and you'll be all set. The Windows VM, this is the VM on the internal side, the trust side that we'll be logging into later. Looking at the networking configuration, pretty simple configuration. We only have an untrust interface and a trust interface. Pretty straightforward. And everything relevant was in that config file. So if you wanted to pour through that config file, it's a good exercise. Also, just kind of looking through the configuration here could be helpful too. So now that we have uploaded the configuration, we just need to commit it. And when you upload a new configuration, your only option is to commit all changes. You cannot commit changes only created by your user. So we'll commit that. And that'll be pretty much all we need to do there. Okay, the commit completed successfully. So for the most part, we're finished within this interface. Not much else to do here for what we need right now. So we will switch out, go to our Windows instance, make sure we can log into it, and then we'll know everything works. Right, we're ready to go and try to log into our Windows instance. We've got our IP address that we got from our Terraform output, and this is the untrust public IP that we're using. We use the management IP to log into the firewall and make our configuration changes, but in this case, we're using the untrust IP. So we're gonna go ahead and connect to that. Put our password in there. And Windows opened up pretty good, so we were able to RDP through the firewall. Let's open up the web browser, make sure everything works okay. And we'll go straight to confirming our IP address just so we can see that we are in fact going out through the firewall. And we can see the IP address listed here is the same IP address that we RDP'd into. So we are connecting to the public IP of the Palo Alto firewall. The NAT is sending us into the Windows instance. And from the Windows instance, when we browse out to the internet, we're going out through the same IP address that we came in through. So everything seems to work. So we don't want to forget to clean things up. So let's bounce over to VS Code and do a final cleanup. Okay, last stop, VS Code to do our cleanup. We're just going to do Terraform destroy. And we always want to make sure we remember to do this because these things that we put out in the cloud can incur costs if we leave them running out there. So we want to make sure we remember to come back and clean up the configuration so we're not getting charged unexpectedly. And success, it all worked. So we've gone and destroyed everything that we had deployed into Azure, so we won't have any unexpected costs there. So that's a good thing. And just to sum up, so we went through, we looked at some of the code starting off just to see some of the differences when we're deploying a firewall. Took a look at the Azure console, went through the deployment and destroyment, and we're in a good place. So I hope you enjoyed this video. There's going to be more coming. We'll have some more cool topics with some of the different cloud providers, some different technologies, so stay tuned. Thanks for visiting 2 + 2 = Cabbage. If you found this video useful, like and subscribe to show me there are people out there who would like to see more of this content.